A local nonprofit is encouraging families to invest in their children's future on Black Friday instead of shopping at the mall. Fresh Perspective Seminars is hosting its 10th annual Black Friday Scholarship Bootcamp in Detroit on November 24th. High school juniors and seniors, along with their parents, can learn about college scholarships and how to navigate the world of financial aid. The event is the brainchild of the group's founder, Gwen Thomas, who is on a mission to help families eliminate college debt. Gwen Thomas, welcome to American Black Journal.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Yeah. So tell me about Black Friday Scholarship Bootcamp. I love that name, the Scholarship Bootcamp. What happens on that day and why is it so important?
Well, we align ourselves with the theme of the traditional retail Black Friday. And so while America's out shopping, I'm working with Metro Detroit kids to help them shop for scholarships. And, our organization is a college and career readiness organization. And, the issue of college debt is something that has affected so many people across the country. And so it's our own way of having a solution to the college debt crises. We find that most students are intimidated by the scholarship writing process. So first of all, we try to work with students to have them understand it's just about them creating their narrative and talking about who they are as a student and how do they shape that essay to talk about the pursuit of their dreams and their hopes. And so we start with that premise first, to have them to, make sure they have a portfolio that includes some of the great things that they've been doing as a student, their whole learning process. And then on that day, we have a team of professionals who are coming out and talking to students about 21st century careers, because we want to make sure students are going into sustainable careers that make them employable.
Yeah. So one of the things I think is really true about the college application process, and I know a little about it because I now have two college-age children, and so the last 2 years we've had to go through this process in the fall. There is so much information out there. There are so many things you have to know. There are so many deadlines you have to meet. It really is almost like drinking from a fire hose to try to get all of it and understand it. I feel like that's half the battle, knowing what you're supposed to do, when you're supposed to do it, and how you're supposed to do it. You got to get there before you even think about where you're going to go to school or how you're going to pay for it.
You know what? And you're absolutely right, because, I started this process with my own son, some 15 years ago. And so I have sat in the shoes of many people who, are challenged with this process. And it's a lot different than it was when we were in college. And college has gotten so expensive. So we try to make sure that students, understand those processes from beginning to end, from admissions. And we actually try to start with our students as early as 8th grade. But for the most part, we know the reality is, families are busy with so many things. So for example, the boot camp, we invite 11th graders because a lot of them don't know that they can start applying for scholarships as early as the 11th grade. And so we want them to have enough time to plan. Planning is essential. I mean, it's so many things to manage: the admission process and determining, what school you're going to select and what really makes sense financially and academically. And we want to make sure students are matched with their right skill sets.
Yeah. The other thing that I kind of encountered in the last few years is that the number of aids, either scholarship or grants or other kind of funding for college that's available out there. I mean, there's so much more than most families would guess, and I think there's a little bit of intimidation sometimes that okay, I don't think my child might qualify for this kind of aid or for this kind of scholarship. And so people don't lean into it. But when you really start looking, there is so much out there. There really is a lot of opportunity to help you pay for these really expensive educations.
Right, and that is a question that I hear from families all the time, and they make the assumption that the scholarships only apply for low-income students, and that is not the case. I've got a student right now who came from a middle-income family who ended up getting scholarships to pay for Wellesley, and she doesn't pay a dime. And so the misnomer, if you will, is that, that is the case, but, there are merit scholarships, there are leadership scholarships. I mean, literally there's about 25 to 30 different type of scholarships that students can qualify for, but it takes work. You mean, students as it relates to them leaning in. I tell parents all the time, your student has to have some skin in the game. Otherwise, they're going to defer to mom and dad, and it's going to be a mommy ship or a daddy ship instead of a scholarship. So, and then the other thing, Steve, is that so many students will make the assumption that the scholarships are only for those students entering college as freshmen. And that's not the case. The majority of the larger scholarships go for the upper class college students and grad students and PhD candidates. And so we've got to just make sure we continue to educate families. And that's why I created my book, The Parent Smart Guide to Sending Your Kids to College Without Going Broke. And we've done some of the work for our students, but it's from undergrad all the way to PhD, and it covers, all those grad programs as well.
Yeah. I know you have speakers lined up to talk to students about the careers that they choose, and of course that has a lot to do with how much you want to spend on your education, where you want to go. Talk about how difficult those choices can sometimes be, and the counseling that kids need to try to figure out, is it worth paying $50,000 a year to go get a degree in something that's only going to pay you $35,000 a year?
And we do a lot of coaching with our students because sometimes they're not aware of, renewable energy jobs. They're not familiar with, the wind turbine business or those new 21st century careers where we desperately need young people to embrace, specifically in the STEM field. And so we make sure that we have representatives and professionals from those careers who can talk about their journey. And many times those students, it just takes them a matter of exposure and an understanding of those fields, because these companies are looking for students that are going to drive innovation. They're hungry for young minds. And so, we happily bring those professionals and share that information with students. This year we have, we're going to be talking to students about the Google UX design opportunities for them to get certifications. And we're going to also be talking about this big boom in Detroit with the Black film industry. So we have a couple of great professionals from Hollywood that are coming to be engaged in making sure students know about the behind the scenes film opportunities, as well as we have a guest, Jewel Tankard, who will talk about not only being an entrepreneur, but what do you do with those monies once you become, very wealthy, I should say, and how to manage that money. And then the other thing is students are confused and families are confused with subsidized and up-subsidized loans. And, they have some challenges with which colleges to select and, if they'll be able to afford it. Steve, this time of year, I get so many calls from families who have to come home, whose students have to come home because they've run out of funding. And so we are going to make sure we educate those students on how much monies are available in those programs should you have to, get a loan instead of getting scholarships.
Yeah. Okay, Gwen Thomas, it is always great to see you and talk with you about this. Congratulations on Black Friday Scholarship Bootcamp.
Thank you very much for having me.